Hello again. I do not in general approve of people standing outside schools, shouting slogans, waving banners, and perhaps alarming children or menacing teachers. I never have liked this sort of thing, whether it's been outside high schools in Alabama by people protesting against the desegregation of education, or in the present instance by those concerned about vaccinations. I cannot help but notice, though, that some groups are treated a lot more leniently when behaving like this than others. A few years ago, schools in the English city of Birmingham were being picketed by Muslims who disapproved of the sex education lessons being given. The language used by those who were opposed to such demonstrations was very muted and polite. They called for dialogue with the protesters and the need to reach a consensus. All this dragged on for months, with the police having to mount guard to prevent disorder, and yet hardly anybody felt able to speak their mind about what was going on, for fear of being branded racist or Islamophobic. Earlier this year there were similar protests and pickets outside Batley school near Bradford after an image of the Prophet Muhammad was shown to pupils. Again, the police were in attendance and everybody was told for the need for mutual respect. The Department for Education issued a statement in which they talked of the need to promote respect and tolerance between people of different faiths and beliefs, including in deciding which materials to use in the classroom. All very polite. I give a link to a news item on this in the description to this video. So much for protest pickets and intimidation when conducted by Muslims whose beliefs have seemingly been slighted by schools. Can anybody seriously imagine an MP daring to say something like this during a demonstration by Muslims? I have condemned it for what it is, ignorant people endangering other people's lives. It is just totally irresponsible by these people. I've suggested they're likely to cause a breach of the peace and the police should move them on. It's not likely, is it, that anybody, let alone a member of parliament, would speak in such blunt terms about demonstrations by Muslims concerned about sex education lessons, or indeed, in the case of the image of the Prophet, religious education lessons. Can we really imagine anybody daring to stand up to a group of Muslims in that way? Describing them as ignorant people? I think not. These comments were made earlier this month by Michael Fabricant, the Member of Parliament for the Staffordshire town of Lichfield, about a demonstration which, according to the police, was described in this way. A small number of people were involved in a peaceful protest and it ended before 9 a.m. This was outside a school in Lichfield. I give a link to a news item about this also in the description to this video. This morning we see that the Home Secretary has called for the police to crack down on such protests, and the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer, says that there should be exclusion zones outside schools to prevent protests. Anybody spot the difference here with the way that protests by Muslims have been handled over the last few years? Yes? This is, of course, nothing to do with the relative merits of the causes about which protests outside schools are or have been organised. It's rather about the fact that in the one case, everybody is very polite and reasonable, and we all talk about seeing the other chap's point of view, but in the other, an MP feels free to talk about ignorant people. Once again, may I ask viewers if they have ever in all their lives heard a British MP dismiss Muslims objecting to this or that as ignorant people? If I didn't know better, I might almost be tempted to think that there are two entirely separate and distinct sets of guidelines in this country for handling and talking about protests in which Muslims are involved and those by white people. In the first case, we must talk of establishing a dialogue, maintaining mutual respect, the need to look at other points of view and so on. On the other hand, we are able to urge the police to crack down on ignorant people. I say nothing again of the whether or not either of these separate groups of protesters have any particular good point about any of the subjects that they're talking of. I don't approve of protest outside schools, and I think they should stop. But I would also like to see even-handed treatment of all such protests, regardless of the ethnicity, skin colour or religion of those involved.